Gospodine predsjedniče, poštovani ministri, gospodine župane, dragi panelisti, poštovani učesnici, dragi prijatelji, dear friends, everybody should understand that. Veliko mi je zadovoljstvo da vas mogu pozdraviti i zaželiti vam dobrodošlicu ovdje na Croatia Forum u Dubrovniku. Kao što znate, tema ovogodišnjeg foruma je energetika. I provest ćemo danas popodne i sutra raspravljajući o energetici, energetici kao politici, energetici kao skupu mjera i posebnih politika, energetici kao gospodarstvu i energetici kao sigurnosti. Za ovaj Croatia Forum planirali smo naše razgovore u 3 panela. Jedan se odnosi, koji će biti danas popodne, odnosi se na energetiku i međunarodne odnose. Drugi se odnosi na energetsku politiku Europske unije i treći se odnosi na europsku energetsku sigurnost i takozvani južni plinski koridor. Sigurna sam da kao i ja s velikim interesom očekujete komentare i rasprave naših panelista i mislim da je u potpunosti primjereno i zapravo zanimljivo kako ćemo naše razgovore voditi u Dubrovniku, gradu koji je možda najpoznatiji, osim po arhitektonskoj ljepoti, po činjenici da je kroz svoju povijest rješavao i zaobilazio sukobe upravo kroz gospodarsku suradnju i kroz trgovinu. Dozvolite mi da sada sa velikim zadovoljstvom pozovem predsjednika Republike Hrvatske, gospodina Ive Josipovića, da nam se obrati. Gospodine predsjedniče, ja vas molim da se obratite ovom skupu i otvorite Croatia Forum.
Poštovana gospođo ministrice, gospođe i gospodo ministri, uvaženi gosti, gospodine župane, iznimno mi je zadovoljstvo što sam danas ovdje s vama. Kao prvo zahvaljujem vama, gospođo ministrice, Vladi Republike Hrvatske, što ste organizirali ovakav jedan skup na temu koja je zaista iznimno važna i aktualna. Energetska sigurnost i energetika općenito su iznimno važne strateške teme koje danas zauzimaju sve značajnije mjesto u dugoročnim strateškim promišljanjima. Nadam se da će i ovaj skup doprinijeti viziji održivog energetskog razvoja Europe. Europa se danas nalazi pred izazovom sigurne i održive opskrbe energijom. Pitanja kako nadvladati ovisnost o opskrbi iz inozemstva, kako osigurati diverzifikaciju izvora, kako zajamčiti sigurnost nabave. To su sve politička, gospodarska i strateška pitanja. Ona zahtijevaju zajedničko i sustavno promišljanje te dugoročno strateško definiranje i planiranje. U gospodarskom smislu učinkovita energetska politika je temelj trajne gospodarske stabilnosti Europe i konkurentnosti europskog gospodarstva. Tako su integrirane i pouzdane energetske mreže ključni preduvjet ne samo u realizaciji ciljeva energetske politike, već i ekonomske strategije Europske unije. U političkom smislu energetska politika je transnacionalno, regionalno i globalno pitanje i ne može se uspješno voditi u izolaciji unutar granica jedne države, bez suradnje i bez konzultacija. Energetska politika Europske unije postavila je dobar temelj za suradnju među članicama, ali i za dijalog s partnerima diljem svijeta. Nama je naravno posebno zanimljiva suradnja s našim susjedima i prijateljima iz regije. Europska unija prepoznala je važnost sistematičnijeg, uvođenja energetske sigurnosti u svoju vanjsku politiku. U tom smislu treba nastaviti jačati međunarodnu poziciju Europske unije. Danas zemlje članice Europske unije plaćaju visoku cijenu postojećih zastarjelih i međusobno slabo povezanih infrastrukturnih objekata. Takvo je stanje neodrživo. Izgradnja modernih, pametnih mreža uz osiguranje skladištenja energenata predstavljaju glavne izazove zajedničke energetske politike. No, učinkovita energetska politika zahtjeva i društvenu odgovornost, jer energetski razvoj zemlje snažno utječe i na kvalitetu života stanovništva. Stoga je nužno da i korištenje obnovljivih izvora energije te zelene tehnologije budu u fokusu svakog budućeg djelovanja. Sve su to izazovi s kojima se moramo suočiti i raditi na njihovom prevladavanju. Međutim, da bi se u svemu tome i uspjelo, nužne su investicije. Svjestan sam da su sredstva potrebna za realiziranje novih projekata ne samo znatna, nego ih je i teško osigurati. Ali smatram da je trošak zadržavanja postojećeg stanja još i veći. Što se tiče Republike Hrvatske, projekcije govore da će iza 2020. godine, ako se nastave sadašnji trendovi, ovisnost Hrvatske o uvozu energenata prijeći 70%. Hrvatski potencijali nisu skromni. Ovdje prvenstveno mislim na naš geoprometni položaj između Mediterana i Srednje Europe. No da bi se ti potencijali realizirali i da bi se Hrvatska integrirala u europske tokove, potrebna je realizacija više infrastrukturnih projekata. To su prije svega izgradnja Jadransko-jonskog plinovoda i njegovo spajanje na transjadranski plinovod, te izgradnja LNG terminala u Omišlju na otoku Krku. Ta dva projekta ujedno su i u skladu s nastojanjima energetske politike Europske unije da diversificira dobavne pravce za plin. Jadransko-jonski bi se plinovod iz Kaspijske regije transportirao direktno do europskih kupaca, a gradnjom LNG-a terminala na Krku otvara se mogućnost transporta plina sve do Poljske. S obzirom na to, Hrvatska se nalazi u idealnoj poziciji da postane energetsko čvorište za srednju i jugoistočnu Europu. Ali unatoč ovim nekim možda strateškim naznakama i promišljanjima, ja ne mogu, a da ne ukažem na još jedan element politike, energetske politike. Europska unija govori o energetskom siromaštvu pojedinaca. To je stanje u kojem neke naše građanke i građani ne mogu, s obzirom na svoje prihode, podmiriti cijene nužnih energenata. I Europska unija je stvorila određene kriterije koje bismo svi trebali implementirati i koja bi zajamčila svim našim građankama i građanima minimum energetske sigurnosti. Gospođe i gospodo, ministrice, ministri, uvaženi sudionici ovog skupa, nadam se da će neke od ovih tema naći refleksije i u vašim izlaganjima. Želim vam uspješan rad i proglašavam konferenciju otvorenom. Hvala vam lijepa.
Zahvaljujem, gospodine predsjedniče. Now that the conference has been opened, welcome once more, and I will invite the panelists of our first panel to join me here on this stage, I guess. So we can start with our first panel and our first discussion. If I may, I will invite Mr. Zlatko Lagumdžija, Vice Chairman of the Council of Ministers and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Igor Lukšić, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration of Montenegro. Ahmet Davutoglu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. Lynn Jelic, Minister of State for Foreign and Consular Affairs, Canada. Amos Hochstein, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Diplomacy, U.S. State Department, the United States. Sava Mikhail, Deputy Director, Department of Economic Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russian Federation. And Michael Rühle, Head of Energy Security Section, NATO. Thank you very much, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would say that by framing our topic, energy and international relations, energy and politics, energy and regional relations, that we are, we can say, in the forefront of the new approach to energy, where it is to a large extent seen as the foundation and as a crucial element, more and more so, of foreign policy and of international relations. I think one could say that it has always been that way, but it wasn't always viewed that way. Shale gas technology and exploitation, new gas reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean, alternative energy sources, energy efficiency projects, and bringing Caspian gas into Europe, these are just a few comparatively recent developments that already have and definitely will greatly influence the energy markets, but they have and definitely will greatly influence relations among the countries and greatly influence world geopolitics. Each country wants to be secure as far as energy is concerned. And energy security, in that sense, is definitely come to the top of the list, or at least very close to the top of the list of the concerns of all the countries. That has been mostly translated into diversification of routes, sources, and suppliers. But at the same time, no country, and certainly no country in this part of the world, can achieve this type of energy security on its own. No country can achieve energy security alone, ignoring the neighbors, ignoring the region, ignoring the broader region, and then ignoring also new potential regions that energy relations are establishing around the world, but certainly in Europe and its eastern neighborhood. The principle, I would say, is not new. There is a long history of struggle over scarce resources. The question is only how to go about it. And how to go about it is the motivation and the basic rationale behind the topic and the discussions I hope we will have at this Croatia Forum. Today, we believe that this type of connectedness, that this type of interest creates interdependence among the countries. But in the past, competition over energy sources, and not so distant past, competition over energy sources have very often also been a cause for conflict, been a cause for war. The question that I would like to raise here is this inevitable? Is the fact that energy and energy sources and energy routes are so important, is this of necessity a road to conflict? Is this a dormant conflict waiting to happen? Or is it maybe a foundation for newfound forms and newfound need for cooperation among countries? What usually happened in the past is that political and geopolitical aspects of energy were neglected, very often ignored, or at least treated as of secondary and tertiary importance, until it was too late. Some countries thought that they didn't need to talk, that they didn't need to cooperate, because they had the advantage of energy resources, of having energy resources. And then some new things were invented, some new things were discovered, and there was all of a sudden a new set of relations that changed the positions of control or the positions of influence that were thought to be fixed and established for a long time, and the relations among countries changed. Quite often this political aspect of energy relations was ignored until conflicts and even wars erupted without even trying to see what would be the alternative. What would be the alternative to war in sharing resources, in cooperating, in developing energy resources? But political interdependence through energy can, it is my deep conviction, also be an excellent basis and a very productive basis for future cooperation. In the history-long interplay and dilemma between conflict and cooperation, I think cooperation should have at least as good a chance, if not a better chance, to win over conflict when the topic of energy is addressed, because it actually does offer a foundation for a win-win, as it's said sometimes, or for a multi-dimensional profit and multi-country gain if it's founded on cooperative processes. It is because of that, in my opinion, important to become aware, to create an awareness that there is a road of cooperation in energy policy and in matters of energy, because, as history shows us, it is possible, but it is not inevitable. In the past, it has often happened that it actually went in the other direction, that it wasn't a foundation for cooperation. And therefore, I would like, and this was the sort of idea behind this year's topic of our forum, is let's, in this region, let's in Europe, let's, together with our neighbors, let's worldwide, try to initiate the necessity of steering energy policy and geopolitics of energy, steering it in the direction of cooperation, in the direction of finding common goals and common interests, rather than letting it develop of itself and then seeing what happens, because seeing what happens didn't turn out so good in many occasions in the past. And I hope that this panel might be, and this conference, might be a small contribution to consciously steering energy policy and geopolitics of energy towards global cooperation rather than its ugly alternative. And therefore, I see today my co-panelists, friends, and I think also co-skippers on this trip towards cooperation in something that has such great potentials, but necessarily will not turn out great without a conscious effort. It gives me, therefore, great pleasure to invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina, my friend Zlatko Lagumdzija, to give his statement. Zlatko.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, colleagues. Of course, I will just, like everyone else, give a small, brief introduction, which I prepared, like everyone who comes to the stage in this capacity has to be prepared. But of course, the best way is to speak first, because you say what you are prepared for. But when you speak second, third, and fourth, whatever you prepare for, someone is tickling you and giving you the outline, a new line for what you should say in order to reflect, so it doesn't look like a series of prepared speeches. I will, in that context, I will just continue with, I think, the key line of this panel and probably the key line of this conference, since we are talking about the role of energy in international relations, and that's what Vesna actually ended with, a very key point. Are we going to cooperate? Are we going to conflict? And I think the choice in between conflict and cooperation is not only the choice what will be the final outcome. Of course, the final outcome will be either cooperation or conflict. But when you're talking about energy as a tool of foreign policy, or foreign policy as a tool for energy, you actually have to choose in the very beginning, when it comes to energy itself, are you going to cooperate or conflict? So actually, the very choice in the very beginning, you are making choice what will have as an outcome. If you start policies in that area with cooperation, you may have a final result, cooperation on a broader scale. If you start even with energy, and today we are witnesses, and not only today, in centuries, we are witnesses of energy being source of conflicts. And every time when energy was source of conflicts, it made some balance of power. But in the end, it created instability, it created injustice, and it created longer lasting, if not war, then long-lasting non-peace. In that sense, I think that we should try to find ways how to make this cooperation in the field of energy, because after all, international relations, and our job is, even if the countries or that we represent, or someone else, of course, represent, not us, because we are not representing countries who are in any kind of conflict. But if someone is playing an international role and representing a country, even when the countries are in conflict, you're trying to find a way how to cooperate and get out of the conflict. So in that respect, I would point out first that when it comes to energy cooperation, we are actually making choices in between cohesion or disintegration of certain part of the region or world itself, or any neighboring countries. So cooperation in energy area is definitely leading us to the cohesion of the overall region, which is covered by that energy issue. At the same time, we are actually choosing in between integration or disintegration or segregation in certain parts of the world, because if we choose to fight and go in a conflict over energy, then we will definitely end in more segregated societies and then integrated societies. At the same time, we are talking also about making choice in between prosperity and misery. Every time when we are talking about cooperation in energy sector, we are talking about chances for prosperity. Anytime where we are conflicting about energy, we are at least making some people who do not deserve it to end in a misery, if not everyone else on the longer scale. And last but not the least, of course, cooperation or conflict in area of energy is actually bringing us to the outcome of choosing between war and peace in a broader sense of that meaning. That's the reason why when we are here in Hotel Palace in Dubrovnik, I cannot skip to just remember for a second the last time when we met in here, that was a perfect example of cooperation in a region, in countries that are coming from different continents, in countries that are coming from European Union, from waiting of European Union, waiting room for European Union, or whatever status we are all in. But that was a perfect example. We were, I think, in here in June this year, when there was a major decision for countries from Turkey and Greece to Albania, Montenegro, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Italy. There was an event that Vesna hosted in here, which actually put us together in order to make one more step, in order to make our case being the case, which should be ending in cooperation about the project called TAP and project called IAP. I'm glad that Ahmed is here. His ambassador was at that time helping us and very supportive with it. And at that time, we were much more concerned about getting TAP, because TAP was the real project. IAP was not so real project at that time. And at that time, we were talking not about connecting IAP with TAP. We were more talking about getting TAP, because in the end we said why we will be connecting TAP and IAP, and talking about how we would connect TAP and IAP if we don't get TAP. So that's the reason why we said, okay, we'll postpone it. But now it's about time to show that that cooperation in between TAP and IAP is something that, the fact that TAP and IAP can be easily translated in type, maybe of some help in a marketing sense, Ahmed. So that type of cooperation of TAP and IAP meant something which is much bigger, and in which actually we are creating synergy, in which little modules, when they put them together, they create much bigger thing that's just some of those models. In that respect, I think that what we, as a foreign ministers, and what actually helped, everyone knew in here, even technocrats who were coming from, let's say, big multinational companies, who were interested only in economic feasibility, and who were interested that on the end, it is more profitable project than another one. But we knew that at the same time, decision is not going to be only based on that, because we knew that if it would be only about what is economically better, this route or alternative route that we're competing with. If we talk about economy, we knew that TAP plus IAP is much more economically, let's say, reasonable. If we talk technologically speaking, we all knew that from technological point of view, it will be also logical that TAP IAP wins over alternative route. But we knew that there is third element, which is, on the end, social, political, call it however you want to, but there is third aspect of it, which is what it will mean for the prosperity of this region or the broader region in which decision makers are interested in. So we actually, as a foreign ministers, as a diplomacy of these countries, we try to do our most and our best, which we could, not to say that our project is economically and technologically more reasonable. We tried to explain that this project is creating another added value in third area of politics, area of regional cooperation, and what does that mean for this region. For this region, this project definitely, we all know that it means new economic chances. We know that it's meaning, technologically speaking, the good chance, but we knew at the same time that this is contributing to the cohesion of the region. And cohesion of the region is actually something which we were been missing for a few decades. That's something that this project was about. That was the very concrete connection in between energy issue, political issue, economic issue, social issue, technological issue, and in the end, foreign policy issue. So I just couldn't omit this example, because that's the very same place we were talking about. And I'll give you another example in order to close up this introductory remarks. It is very important to put together those three major drivers of change: technology, economy, and social changes or political changes or policy changes, political, social changes in broadest context. Because these three types of changes are actually what we are trying to manage. And energy projects are a very good example of managing those three types of changes at the same time. Because technologically speaking, energy is going to be cheaper, it is going to be more present, and it is going to be, as Mr. President said, more fairly distributed, especially in organized societies like European Union is. But economic aspect of it is also more than evident, what that energy issues are contributing to the overall economic growth and prosperity of certain region. And the last point, which I consider the most important one, is that energy cooperation area of energy, is giving us a clear guidelines that we should be cooperating. We are sentenced to cooperation in between us in different ways, as a goal of our policies, our politics, our governments, our ministries, and so on and so on. I very much, when it comes to those three types of changes, it always reminds me of the energy policy and meaning of energy in the country where I'm coming from. You are probably aware that Bosnia and Herzegovina was the only country in the region, because due to historical circumstances, is the one that is actually exporting electricity in the region. That's not because we made the new energy power plants after the war. As a matter of fact, the last big power plants, energy power plants in Bosnia and Herzegovina were made when Marshal Tito was alive. So, I mean, what we are using today is actually those power potentials. But even such potentials are enough after war in Bosnia and Herzegovina that we are exporting energy. That's why electricity is so important for us. And the last point, what I want to make is, we are now confronted with one big challenge. I'll give you an example. For 10, 15 years in Bosnia and Herzegovina and with our neighbors, we are talking, and Igor knows much more than me about it, about how to cooperate on River Drina in between countries and inside the countries. And by the time we are talking about it, probably we should put some VAT, fiskalni račun, post someplace that someone just clicks and looks at the Drina and sees how many fiskalni računs are missing over there, because the river is just going and going and going, and we are waiting to do something. So it's not about fiscal račun, it's about us. Of course, it's about fiscal račun as well, but in a different context. But in this context, it's about producing something, making something that will, and if we manage to cooperate in Drina River, it will mean a lot for integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina inside Bosnia and Herzegovina. It will mean a lot for integration in a broader regional context, and of Montenegro and of Serbia, and us bringing in European values, European investors, and exporting something to Europe, for the beginning at least electricity. Thank you, Vesna.
Thank you very much, Zlatko. I can see that at least we have impressed you with the fiscal discipline.
Of course. You know where I'm coming from.
I will now invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration of Montenegro, Igor Lukšić. Igor, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you, Vesna. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all, it's great to see a lot of you again just a few days after we all came back from New York. And one of the events we had in New York was to attend the Caspian Forum. It was on similar topic. It was also on the topic of how important energy is in today's world. But before moving to the core of this panel, let me first of all appreciate Vesna's energy for keeping this whole topic very high on the agenda. It's really commendable. It's really important, because I really appreciate her talking about this issue basically everywhere she has the opportunity to talk about this, because it's so important. And by keeping this topic high on the agenda. She's working in favor of not only interests of Croatia, she's working in favor of interests of the whole region, so all the countries in the region. And I think that is really the great thing we can do. Talking about this VAT metaphor that Zlatko used, I think it could be, there could be many, many really fields of interest, fields of joint work in which we could really calculate so many wasted opportunities. And I think the point of us working together is to finally say, well, let's start to turn those opportunities into something which has material dimension. Let me invoke one of the expressions which actually Zlatko misinterpreted some other guy's words. But nevertheless, I think it's really important to keep this topic high on the agenda, because every day we see how things change. And let's just remind ourselves that only several years ago, there was nobody talking about fracking gas out of the gas shales, as it's called. But such an advanced technology that, for example, they use in the United States is changing rapidly the energy perspectives of the whole world, and probably is going to add to the changed perception of the U.S. role in the world even. So I think that with the new gas field open or discovered, with the new technology applied, with everything that's going on in the field of energy, it's not only that it contradicts those Malthusians or neo-Malthusians, because humankind seems to be always in the possibility to find a new response to this challenge of constraints of resources, but actually additionally opens different new windows of opportunity, and we need to adapt to it. President Josipović in his speech referred to the EU Energy 2020 strategy. And it says secure, sustainable and competitive energy is of fundamental importance to the EU's economy, industry and citizens, and the core goal of EU policy. To achieve this goal, the EU needs adequate instruments to act within the EU and promote its interest in relation to third countries. So we all, I mean, the countries which are out of the EU and which have the ambition to join the EU, need to develop our own strategies. So Montenegro has done so. So our own energy policy is based on the EU 2020 strategy, and everything we actually do is in attempt to not only adjust ourselves, but to the overarching European strategy, but also to explore possibilities we have in this field, because these possibilities are important to make our economies grow again. The fact that we're going to see even more changes to the energy market in the coming years actually will probably press other countries which are energy sources rich, for example, Arab countries, actually to find different ways to turn that very cheap gas into something else, such as industrial production, such as aluminium, for example, or some other goods, which puts European economies in even more difficult positions. So we need to think about it and readjust ourselves constantly and constantly. We have that problem in Montenegro. You know, we have the problem of still unfinished transition with regards to some of the industrial components. So by exploring channels and avenues of cooperation in the field of energy, we are actually looking at or looking for different new models of cooperation and different engines of our growth. One of the projects both Vesna and Zlatko have referred to is this new gas corridor, TAP EAP, with Adriatic Ionian component, very important to our countries. And it is, I believe, a good example of how countries in the region could work together, cooperate in order to achieve the same goal. But at the same time, there's so many challenges lying ahead. And as ministers of energy and economy met the other week, last week, and discussed in Zagreb, I think, they actually found out that there is a lot of things that we should work together in order to further define entry and exit points of the corridor, financing of the project, some unresolved issues, and so on and so on. But I think what makes Trans-Adriatic and Adriatic-Ionian gas corridor important is also that it creates a whole round of other opportunities for further regional and bilateral cooperation. And this whole this whole new gas corridor, when materialized, will make it even more viable, a joint attempt both of Croatia and Montenegro to look also into our offshore chances to valorize and explore gas and oil possibilities, but we're talking about gas as probably the energy source of the 21st century. So that's one thing, and the other strategic project, very important to us in Montenegro, is the seabed cable that should interconnect Montenegro with Italy. That project is also bears regional value because it increases the viability of a number of other projects in the region, because it doesn't mean that it's only Montenegrin excess energy or electricity should be transmitted to Italy, but it's also Bosnian-Herzegovian electricity that could be further made use of, but also other countries in the region. And the reference to Drina River is a great one because it actually shows that we need to quicken up with different activities in order really to come forward with concrete steps and finally move from this verbal, oral approach into something which has really more material dimension. Because at the end of the day, our citizens, our people that live in our countries will, I mean, they ask it, I mean, every day already. But I think this aspect of dealing with politics will grow in importance over the years as our region is definitely progressing towards Europe, towards NATO and so on. So people will start to ask even more loudly, all right, so where do we stand with our most concrete needs, most immediate needs at day-to-day lives? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmet Davutoglu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, who knows a lot about many of the things we've mentioned, and it's a real pleasure to see the possibilities that are opening up for our cooperation in the years to come in this field. Ahmet.
Thank you, Vesna. Mr. President, dear colleagues, it is a very interesting topic, energy and international relations. But whenever I make a statement, a speech, or a conference in a city, especially in a historic city, I am trying always to connect the spirit of this historic city with the agenda, with the item. Dubrovnik, a historic city, is teaching us something on this subject. If we look at the history of Dubrovnik, Dubrovnik has been one of the most prosperous and peaceful cities for centuries, not because of having a huge military power, but because of one single secret that's showing the interdependency, the role of interdependency, economic interdependency in establishing political order and peace. Last time when I came to Dubrovnik, I visited the museum and I saw several ferman giving privileges to the merchants of Dubrovnik throughout the Ottoman territories. For big states around Dubrovnik, the best thing to do is to keep Dubrovnik as an area of economic interdependency, and people of Dubrovnik use this in such a skillful manner to get benefit out of this, and at the same time having peace around. Similarly now, this lesson is true for energy policies. If we discuss energy and international system, international relations, or global order, whatever you call it, we can look back history again teaching us the role, the relation between Silk Road and political order throughout the centuries. Silk Road from China up to Mediterranean through all those territories was the main reason whether there is a political conflict or political order. like caravans, those who are carrying these commodities from China to Mediterranean, they always prefer to have either one single authority if possible, or a transcending economic relations which will not be affected by political competition of several authorities. It means there was a political order when Silk Road was functioning. But if somebody wants to dominate, then the clashes started, or if interdependence is being affected negatively, then there cannot be an international order. Now coming to energy, assume that, please imagine, instead of long caravans with camels, now we have energy pipelines. And like caravan carriers in those days, now we have energy companies going through several countries. And in order to carry this material from the producing place up to the consumer place, there need to be a political order. Otherwise, you cannot be sure who will be stopping caravans today. You cannot be sure who will be stopping energy flow. Therefore, the lesson what Dubrovnik teaches us today is interdependency, economic and energy interdependency is the best way of peace and stability and prosperity of international relations. If this is the case, now we can look to energy policies regarding to our region, to our national issues. Here, as Igor mentioned, last week we were in Caspian Forum. Today we are Croatia Forum, 2 Cs, Caspian and Croatia. And there we discussed in details. And I said, turn up and tap. Now, maybe we can say type with EAP together, is not only an energy project, it is a peace project. After the post-Cold War, 2 regions were seen as like zones of conflicts and frozen conflicts, and also zones of certain ethnic or other type sectarian clashes, Caspian, Caucasian, and Balkans. Now, this corridor is becoming a peace corridor through common interest. Here, I want to mention 3 levels of analysis. The first one is national energy policies or strategies. Second is regional energy strategies. Third is global energy strategies. Those who are connecting these 3 levels in a rational manner, they will be forerunning, or they will be leading the next decades in energy policies. But those who are not able to connect these 3 levels, they will be losing, either in politics or in economics. Coming to national strategy, for example. In national energy strategy, there are 3 categories of states: producers, transit countries, consuming countries. And some countries are combined, some countries have only one, but very rare countries have these 3 together. For example, for Turkey, we are a big, because of our geography, a transit country and a rising consuming country. Last quarter, our economic growth is 4.4%, and the need of last year, the rise of need for energy of Turkey is 4% annually. One of the biggest growing, this is the biggest numbers in OECD and in Europe, in the sense of economic growth and in the sense of need for energy. So Turkey as a consuming country first should think, this is our national energy strategy. Energy security is a must for us to continue, because we are not energy consuming country. We have a huge hydroelectric potential, as Zlatko mentioned, but this is not good enough. We need to have other alternative energy resources. Therefore, our national energy strategy is to use our geography as much as possible as transit country, and to find energy resources as much as possible. For example, in our economy, the weakest point of our economy in this growth is current deficit. And our energy deficit is $60 billion US, and our current deficit is $60 billion US. Assume that if we had our own energy resources, we wouldn't have any deficit in our balance of economy. So then this is our energy strategy. How can we do this? Only through stability in Middle East, in Caucasia, in Central Asia, and in Balkans. And of course, good relations with Russia. Because our energy resources are basically today from Russia, from Azerbaijan, Iran, and some LNG from Algeria and Nigeria. But for the future, our strategy is, because referring to the back, for that we want to see stability around us in order to get the energy, both for our consumption and for transit. Other countries have, for example, Azerbaijan is consumer. What we did with Azerbaijan through TANAP is their their producing country character is combined with our transit and consumption character, and together with Azerbaijan, we created a synergy. That made it possible for TAP. If there was no agreement between Turkey and Azerbaijan, there wouldn't be TAP or IAP. Because how did we bring this? And we are very close nations to each other, yes. We usually say one nation, two states, yes. But at the same time, economic rationality, consumption, production, transit, and consumption came together with Georgia, and we combined this as TANAP. Then we connected this with Greece. Why I am giving this? First, each country has to make its own national energy strategy. How to make a winning position from this. If there is no such a national energy strategy, there cannot be a base for the regional. Second level is regional. Here, unfortunately, this is very timely because in energy security, we have certain problems around us. Why? There is a global economic crisis and European economic crisis. There cannot be much investment in energy sectors, and there is a political crisis in Middle East which may prevent energy security in the future. Therefore, for us, stability in Middle East is a must. Anything threatening Middle Eastern stability is a threat to Turkey, to Turkish economic interest, to Turkish energy. Coming about these, as I said, from linking Caspian to Anatolia, Anatolia to Balkans is a peace project for us. Turkey is a Balkan nation because sometimes I'm giving these examples if our Albanian, Bosniak friends, they don't misunderstand. We have more Albanians in Turkey and more Bosniaks in Turkey than in Albania or Bosnia. But similarly, we have more Cherkess or Chechens in Turkey or more Abkhazians and more Georgians in Turkey than in Abkhazia and Chechnya or even in Georgia. Georgia is almost the same. So we want to see this like a corridor of peace. Through this, our stability will be secured and regional stabilities will be secured. Just to give you one example, in these days people are talking on Iranian engagement. 3 years ago, together with Brazil, I was mediated 8 months with my Brazilian colleague, Celso Amorim, to get a deal with Iran, between Iran and P5+1 for nuclear issue. You know why? Not only to solve nuclear issue. As a neighboring country, we don't want to see any sanction against Iran. Therefore, we try to solve it before the new sanctions are coming. You know why? Because Iran is one of the biggest energy producing country. And Turkey is needing energy. When Iran is in energy market, the oil or gas prices will go down and we will be having more alternatives. Therefore, we work very hard for global peace, but at the same time for our own national interest. Nobody can say, why are you so interested in the Iranian nuclear issue? Today, we are very happy if there is an engagement for that reason. Because Turkish geography, one day, it is not only TANAP, there will be Iranian gas coming to Turkey. There has been several efforts before if this engagement continues. And if, for us, Iraqi stability is important, and we have special relations with KRG in northern Iraq, and we have special relations with central government, because Prime Minister Maliki was in Turkey when Nabucco was at that time an alternative in 2010, because they can provide at least 20 BCM natural gas towards Europe. Therefore, anything happens in Eastern Mediterranean is affecting us, and we are following very closely, because any new gas resources in the Eastern Mediterranean will have to come to Turkey because of our big market, but also because Turkey is the easiest way through this interconnection to Europe. So all these corridors for us makes our geography valuable, and our geography makes these lines meaningful and feasible. This is how we see regional aspect. Where it goes, we don't want any country in Balkans to be isolated from this deal. That will create problem. Therefore, EAP is an important project, and from here I will go tomorrow to Montenegro, then to Albania, from north to south EAP corridor. But we don't want even Bulgaria or Romania or others being isolated, because this is we are sure that there will be a rise in this sense, in the sense of resources. About global energy security, a few sentences here. And we will definitely support any initiative, any peace initiative, and any energy cooperation initiative around us. And this should not be seen against anyone. As I said, we have excellent relations with Russia in energy cooperation, and we will continue to have these. All these should be complementary. Nothing should be against each other. At the end of the day, this should not be only win-win, but this should be win-win-win-win-win. How many countries or actors around should be part of this win? I hope one day European Union will understand this geography and will understand the significance of Turkish membership to EU. It is piteous to say I said this in New York, because still I congratulate Croatia for being member. We started together this road. In marathon, you left us behind. Congratulations, we are happy for this. But can you imagine, despite of this energy security need for Europe, European Union did not open the chapter of energy to us until now because of a political issue. They need this more than us. Beyond this regional, there is a need of a new European energy security strategy, and there we are ready to work with EU. We are candidate, we are negotiating country, and we hope one day they will understand if Turkey is in, this is the real way of energy security and also geopolitical relevance. Lastly, about global energy issues, I want to say that this is geopolitics and geoeconomy. The existing is changing. Yes, like shale gas is bringing new inputs. Another issue, we have to be very careful, because Balkan countries and Anatolia, these are the oldest civilizational zones as well as the most beautiful natural world. The environmental issue is also important here, what I want to say. Hydroelectric, we are strong, and we do this in a very effective manner. In Turkish, like what Zlatko says before in 1950s, Europeans, when they come, they were saying in Turkish, su akar Türk bakar. Su akar Türk bakar means water flows, Turks only watch, observe, nothing. But in the last 40, 50 years, we have several dams, and we are very strong. But at the same time, we have to be careful for environmental and cultural heritage. Similarly, in global scene, climate change, the relation between energy and climate change is essential. At the end of the day, we cannot deliver to our next generations a very strong national economy, energy policy, without an environmental, global environmental, proper global environment. This should be discussed, and among us, among Balkan countries or Caspian countries, we need to have other platform, environmental protection, how to make renewable energy, like wind energy or others, to continue. We should not be thinking that this TAP and EAP as the natural gas project is the only way of cooperation. We have to do this, but at the same time, we have to have other fora to discuss this issue in a much more wide scale, because at the end of the day, energy security today is an essential issue for the sustainability of international order, as I said at the beginning, and for the future of human generation. That is, therefore, I congratulate our Croatian host for this very timely conference and panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister. It gives me great pleasure to invite now, actually, just a very small comment. It really impressed me when Turkey is speaking of geographical position as an important thing. I thought, you know, big countries were important of themselves, but obviously geography works in all cases, and therefore...
more important than geography.
And it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the Minister of State for Foreign and Consular Affairs of Canada, definitely a very big country and also a very important country in this matter, Mrs. Lynn Jelic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to begin by thanking and congratulating our host, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs of the Republic of Croatia, for organizing this event, the Croatia Forum, which focuses on energy issues which are playing an increasing role in defining the politics of the 21st century. I appreciate the invitation to speak at this opening session on the role of energy in international relations, which reflects the significance of Canada as a secure and responsible energy partner that significantly enhances continental and global energy security. By focusing on energy security, the Croatia Forum acknowledges that safe, secure, affordable, and environmentally responsible energy sources and supply are crucial to ensuring the continued economic stability of countries. This is particularly important in the light of increasing energy demands from emerging economic powers, demands that will need to be met through increasingly competitive world energy markets. This brings us to the European focus of this event. Canada and Europe share a long-standing energy trade and investment relationship. Canada and Europe also share common interests in promoting clean, secure, innovative, and efficient energy. In cooperation with European countries and the European Union, we work together on the advancement of these common goals in various fora, notably at the International Energy Agency. And our relationship is rooted in our shared commitment to prosperity and economic growth. This dynamic economic relationship is what I wish to underscore with you today, specifically energy economics, and Canada's views on responsible energy development and the importance of fair and transparent rules of energy. Canada has some very significant energy resources for export, and we are about to become a major player in global energy markets through our exports of liquefied natural gas and oil, a role which Canada can offer energy security and economic stability to the world. However, to achieve these benefits and these shared benefits, there must be a level playing field for how Canada's energy resources are received, regulated, and used. So in this context, I want to focus my short intervention tonight on three key points. Canada's role as an energy leader, as a global energy leader, our nation's unequivocal commitment to the protection of the environment as part of our plan for responsible resource development, and our perspective on the proposed fuel quality directive, which is germane to the theme of tonight's session. First, to talk about the economic importance of Canada's abundant and natural resource, specifically our role as a global energy leader and its relevance to Europe. Simply put, Canada is well-positioned. We're well-positioned to help fill the demands for energy resources from countries which need them. Canada is the world's 5th largest oil producer, and it is the 3rd largest known oil reserves in the world, 97% of which are from the oil sands, the 5th largest producer of hydroelectricity, 5th largest producer of natural gas, and the 2nd largest producer of uranium, and has the 9th largest installed capacity of wind power. Canadian companies are world leaders in hydropower and in long-distance power transmission lines and pipelines. And to put these numbers in context, the international agency, the Energy Agency, predicts that by 2035, global energy demand is expected to grow by 35%. This is with China, India, and the Middle East representing 60% of this increase. Fatih Birol, the IEA's chief economist, said last year that to meet projected demand for oil, the world will need every drop of growing production from Canada's oil sands. While much of the growth in demand will occur in the developing world, it will nonetheless be important for Europe. It will be important for Europe to maintain a safe and stable supply of oil and gas. Canada does not currently export any oil sands crude oil to Europe. The only oil sands products we indirectly supply to the European market are via input to diesel fuel refined in the United States, Gulf Coast, and exported to Europe. However, this could change very soon. Canadian pipeline companies now moving ahead with a west-east pipeline that would deliver oil to Canada's east coast, where the oil that isn't used by Canadian consumers could be sent to India and to Europe. There is a proposal for a liquefied natural gas export project on our east coast. As OECD, European production declines and competition for traditional sources of European oil and gas supply increases over the next 20 years, the reality is that in the future, Europe could very well replace some of this supply by importing oil and gas from Canada's east coast. Ongoing stability in the Middle East region reinforces this, making Canada's energy supply strategically significant for the United States and Europe. Economies around the world need long-term access to secure and competitive energy sources in order to satisfy growing demand, and that means diversified and efficient global markets. Canada is politically stable, we are friendly, and we are a reliable source of energy, and one of the rare major oil exporters that is committed to the responsible development of our natural resources, and we have a very rigorous, transparent, and environmental monitoring regime of our oil and gas production. This brings us to the important dimension to Canada's role as a global energy leader and our commitment to environmental protection. Canada believes that natural resource development and environmental protection can and must be accomplished simultaneously. One does not happen at the expense of the other, and in fact, it is quite the opposite. The most effective way to invest is in the science, in crucial science, in technology, and investing in innovation that is needed to protect the environment. And this is by having a growing and dynamic economy that we make these investments, and I believe that we are leading the world by example. The International Energy Agency ranks Canada 5th in the world in terms of per capita investment in R&D, in research and development in the energy sector, and we're second only to Germany in the rate of energy efficiency improvement among the 16 countries over the period of 1990 to 2008. Last week, the World Energy Council ranked Canada in the 6th place worldwide in its global ranking of 129 countries based on performance in all of the aspects, in all three aspects of the energy trilemma: energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability. Canada is very proud to be leader in green energy. We have one of the cleanest energy systems in the world, with 77% of our electrical power coming from emission-free sources. We already in Canada are halfway to meeting our Copenhagen goal, a goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 17% from 2005 levels by 2020. Canada, along with the United States, United Kingdom, and Norway, are the only major oil producers to have emission reduction measures in place, and Canada's environmental regime will be strengthened with our plans. Our plans to bring in new regulations for greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and the gas sector. Canada is taking an action with the toughest coal regulations in the world and is being recognized for our global carbon capture and our global storage technology. We are a leader through our involvement in the international arena, as well as our continued commitment to research and development, and the development and deployment of large-scale projects, notably in Alberta and Saskatchewan, my hometown province. By any measure, Canada is taking great strides. We're taking great strides to protect our environment, and we're doing this through some tough new laws, and we're investing in science, and this is science that is world-leading. Finally, I would like to address the European Commission's proposal for the Fuel Quality Directive, which is a low-carbon fuel standard that encourages the use of low-emission, intensive transport fuels and requires fuel suppliers to achieve a minimum reduction of 6% in greenhouse gas emissions of fuel supplied in the EU by 2020. Let me state at the outset, Canada has always supported the adoption of measures that result in tangible global GHG reductions. However, the directive implementing measures as currently drafted not only fall short of that goal, but I believe will also lead to worse, if not better, environmental outcomes. Canada continues to have deep concerns regarding this proposed implementing measures for the EU Fuel Quality Directive. You may have heard Canadian officials speak of this before, so I'll be clear and succinct. The implementing measures of the directive single out Canada for more onerous treatment of our oil sands, while it ignores the problems posed by the high GHG emitting crudes already used in vast amounts in the European Union by giving them preferential treatment. A fair and effective EU FQD should be based on the following principles. It should be non-discrimination. It should treat all crude oils proportionally to their actual GHG emission intensities. It should have transparency. The FQD should encourage, not discourage, full reporting, which Canada does, the full reporting of emissions by countries shipping to the EU. Efficiency. The measures should meet the environmental objective, lowering GHG emissions in transport fuels by 6% in the least trade restrictive manner possible and in a manner that does not impose an undue administrative burden on energy producers, refiners, or related suppliers. And finally, energy security. The FQD ought not to single out oil sands crude in such an arbitrary manner. This would potentially reduce EU energy security by having it rely on less stable and secure sources of oil. If there's one thing that you should take home from our position on the directive, it is Canada supports measures designed to achieve real greenhouse gas reductions, and we would be happy to collaborate with the European Union in developing such measures. We ask only that the FQD be fair and effective to everyone and to base that on sound science. In conclusion, in the coming years and decades, we'll pose real challenges for energy consumption and security, particularly as we move forward toward cleaner energy solutions. Canada looks forward to cooperating with the European and other global partners on solutions to these challenges. Countries around the world are looking for safe, secure energy sources to satisfy growing demand, and Canada will continue to be an important source of that supply. As currently proposed, the FQD's implementing measures would throw a wrench into this progress, and moreover, any measure that unfairly restricts the access of oil sands crude to the European Union will undermine global and European Union energy security and introduces unwelcome costs to the European companies and economies. This way forward, and on the way forward for energy supply and environmental protection in the European Union, is to have everyone working together, playing by the same rule book without double standards. In this framework, Canada is already doing its part, strongly committed to doing more. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister Jelic. Our next speaker is Amos Hochstein, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Diplomacy, U.S. Department of State, USA. Just a small footnote. I was actually, before I met Amos Hochstein, I was very impressed by his title, by the fact that there is such an important sort of position for energy diplomacy, and energy diplomacy is recognized as a very important thing in international relations through having this position. And I must say here that my deputy, Joško Klisović, has taken upon himself a number of different aspects of what you're doing, also including energy diplomacy. basically modeled after this idea because obviously it is such an important part of international relations and foreign policy. So, Amos Hochstein, thank you for the idea.
Thank you, Madam Minister, and it's a real honor to be here for this conference, for this, as others have said, a timely conference. I also want to tie back to the beginning of this panel and how much I identify with what my friend from Bosnia and Herzegovina said, that being the sixth speaker, much has been said. So I'll try to be brief and to not repeat what others have said, because I think much of what has been said has been right on target. But I want to start with an observation that ties into what, Minister, what you just said. When I was listening and looking at the panel today and looking at who is sitting on the panel today and tomorrow, it occurred to me that we're having a discussion in a forum about energy security, and the vast majority of the participants are ministers of foreign affairs or from the senior levels of the foreign ministries. I believe that a few years ago this conference would have been held by energy ministers. And I think the very fact, to connect to what you just said, I think that is a great illustration of where we are today on energy security globally. 3 years ago, we had 9 or 15 people in the State Department that looked at energy. They didn't work together. They were groups of 3 in different parts of the department, probably didn't know what the other was doing. And today, we have a bureau, a division that is dedicated to energy diplomacy and energy security. And this was identified by Secretary Clinton when she came in as one of the first items she wanted to do. A recognition that energy security and energy diplomacy is an integral part of foreign policy of the United States, of our national security, and of global national security and global foreign policy. And coming to this, 3 years later, now that we have about 85 or 90 people in Washington, the State Department, well, I should say most of them are home and because we have a government shutdown. But luckily, I got on a plane before the government shutdown. But when they're not shut down, we have about 85 or 90 who work on these issues. And I've now been invited by 4 different countries in Europe to talk to them about how we did it, because they want to create energy security divisions and offices inside their foreign ministries. And I have a good friend and a regular contact in the Turkish Foreign Ministry, who's an excellent person on energy, and Turkey has taken a leadership on many issues regarding energy security, but this is an area that we have much in common. But I want to take the context in which we're talking about today, about European energy security, and put it into a global context, because it's shaped by 2 different changes that are happening simultaneously. One is on the demand change globally, and one is on the supply, and I believe a few of my colleagues have already addressed that. And that global context is remarkable because it is happening at the same time. And they're entirely different and not dependent causes for why they're happening, and yet they're happening at the same time. On the demand side, traditionally the OECD countries led the way in demand. We are now in a shift where non-OECD countries already today and into the foreseeable future, the growth demand is far greater there than it is in the OECD. On the supply side, we're in a dramatic shift as well. It used to be we were in the oil sphere, we were in the OPEC-dominated world, and in gas we had a handful of countries that dominated the gas supply world globally. But today that's changed. We have new producers that are joining the supplier family every year. If you look at the east and west coast of Africa, the largest find in gas anywhere in decades happened in Mozambique just a couple of years ago. Tanzania to the north has an enormous field that has been found, and probably more is there. And the same is true for a little bit behind in Uganda, potentially Kenya. On the west coast, the same story. Not only are new suppliers coming, but some old suppliers that have been around for 50 and 60 years who were seen to be in decline are now rising again. North Africa is no longer just about Libya and Algeria. Morocco has now had several discoveries, and major international oil companies are now exploring there. The Eastern Mediterranean is something that we're going to talk a lot about in the coming years, and it is burgeoning from Israel to Cyprus to Lebanon. and hopefully additional finds and exploration in Egypt as well. Australia is likely to come online later this decade with enormous amounts of gas that will flow into Asia. And as these two things happen in parallel, we have to look at what does this mean for all of us, and how does this factor? Well, we're in the United States. I think it's been mentioned before. We're in an entirely different paradigm than we were just a few years ago. 5 years ago, we had several terminals for importing of LNG. We don't use any of them. We spent $20 billion building them. We're now going to spend double building export facilities. And we're now, I think today, as of this year, we're the largest gas producer in the world. By 2015, we will start our exports, as we've already given 4 licenses for exports of gas to the international market. That alone, just not importing gas, and we import it a lot, has made a difference in the global gas market and allowed for prices to relax. All the gas that was destined for the United States from Qatar and Trinidad is now flowing to Europe and to Asia. And as we start exporting, that paradigm will shift again. In oil, we used to import more than 60%. We're now down to around 30% imports, and that number of imports is dropping. But we're still very reliant on our neighbors in Canada and our neighbors in Mexico and some on the international global market. But that has made a shift again, as my friend from Foreign Minister of Turkey talked about the Iran sanctions. 1 million barrels a day have come off the market from Iran, and the price structure has stayed relatively stable in an unstable time. Part of that is the United States' increased supply, Iraq's increased supply, and other countries coming online. But I want to talk about the changes that this global impact has on Europe. Because as we look at European energy security, a major development that I don't want to go into detail because it's already been discussed here is the Southern Corridor. That I think those of us who remember the conversation in the early 90s of the BTC, of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline that most people did not believe would ever happen, and it's easy to be cynical about the fact that these mega projects don't happen, today is a fact. I think that the Southern Corridor is in some way a closing of a circle that began in the conversations, and it afforded me a great opportunity to go to Istanbul several times to have conferences on BTC and now on Southern Corridor. This is a closing of that circle that began then, of bringing gas from the Caspian into Europe. And as important as that Southern Corridor and selection of TAP is, it's not a silver bullet. It will not solve European energy security problems. It is at first phase 10 BCM that will reach Europe. It is not enough. And therefore we have to look at what are the other things that can be done to make sure that European energy security through diversification and not relying on one source in any one part of Europe, and ensuring that there are no energy islands in Europe, we have to look at a myriad of solutions. One of them has to be TAP, through TANAP, that at first phase is 10 BCM, but with some of the stability coming to the regions around and near Turkey, Kurdish gas, and what happens in Israel and Cyprus and Lebanon can easily contribute to additional resources, if not from Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan into Europe. But again, it can't be alone. When we have those additional resources, the IAP or the IAP can become a reality. But it needs more gas for that to become a reality. Second, we have to look at LNG. And we look at around the map in Europe, and there are many LNG terminals being built everywhere. But I want to focus for a moment as an example on Croatia, because it's an example in leadership, not only in holding this very important conference, but also what it can be as part of the solution for a part of Europe, for this region. And when I say region, I mean more than just the Balkans. If a pipeline from IAP is one solution, the LNG facility that can be built here, because of taking advantage of the geographic location of Croatia, can supply additional BCMs that are not needed for Croatia's domestic needs and not needed only for its Balkan friends, but for the critical and strategic partnerships that Croatia has with its neighbors, principally with Hungary and Slovenia and Slovakia, into Ukraine and Czech Republic. This begins to solve the problem that was talked about earlier, that as we select TAP, and we cheer the selection of TAP as a step forward in this process, we don't forget about the countries that did not get selected, from Bulgaria and Romania and Hungary and Austria. But Croatia can begin to be part of that solution if decisions are taken here in Croatia, in the region, in its neighbors far and wide, in the United States, in Brussels, to allow to make these investments viable and support this region's energy needs. And I think that kind of thinking throughout Europe can mean that we can be in a short number of years in an entirely different place of a conversation on energy security and diversification. I'll add one last point in conclusion, that tying into what, Minister, what you mentioned early on in your comments. The reason that we are all dealing with this in foreign ministries is exactly because of the dichotomy of what energy provides us as options. It's either going to be peace and stability and prosperity and cooperation, or it's going to be towards conflict. We're going in both directions at the same time in different parts of the world. But I believe that if we look at the people sitting on this stage and on the stage tomorrow, in the two panels tomorrow, we can bring that and change that so in a few years we'll only be going in one direction of cooperation. Whether it's in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean and the separation of those two concepts, whether it's in the South China Sea, in Sudan and South Sudan, in Syria and Yemen, these are all, and Libya, these are all areas that we can bring towards cooperation as we have in other places. And I think that the Southern Corridor is a perfect example and model of what can happen between Azerbaijan, with Georgia, with the leadership of Turkey, which can become that bridge of every decision that's made in Azerbaijan is tied directly to decisions that are made in Ankara and Jerusalem and Beirut and Nicosia and Baghdad and Erbil. And of course, those decisions will have a great impact on the EAP countries, the Nabucco West countries, and all of Europe. With that, again, thank you, Madam Minister, for the opportunity to be here. I think this is a critically important subject for our foreign policy and national security and for global stability. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. This was, as we would say, our point exactly. But it is important. We see it as important. And I think there's a lot of work on steering it in this direction for all of us here and many other people who are involved in this worldwide and the region-wide. But we have to start, and I think this is a good start. With this, gives me great pleasure to introduce Sava Mikhail, Deputy Director, Department of Economic Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam Minister. First of all, let me express our thanks for the invitation to attend this meeting and to contribute to the dialogue on energy security and supply. It happens so that in this panel, the United States, Russia, and NATO, they represent the right wing of the panel. So I have no other choice rather to follow a conservative approach and the subject and to support every my word with the concrete figures. To this purpose, I prepared some diagrams, and with your permission, Madam Minister, I would like to make a comment closer to the screen. Okay.
I hope they have.
We believe that the key word in discussing the energy topics is the word of cooperation. First of all, because it is the most productive relationship between the states, and secondly, because it is the most effective way of ensuring the energy supply and thus the energy security. At the latest period, the topics related to the energy supply are discussed at different meetings and conferences in a rather dramatic way, and probably that's the right thing to do, given the importance of this problem for the economic growth and the sustainable economic development in the European Union. But we believe that at the same time we need we need to follow a more realistic approach and look how the things develop on the ground in reality. And we can notice in such a case that the cooperation between the European Union and Russia develop in a smooth way, and there is a stable demand in the European Union for Russia oil and gas. On the other hand, the European Union gets what it needs for its economic growth, and Russian gas and oil supports the endeavors of the European Union to improve the quality of life of peoples living in the countries of the European Union. There is a solid framework, a legal framework, which helps the things and supports the cooperation between the European Union and the Russian Federation. We signed in 1994 a basic agreement, and probably the next year we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of that very important agreement. We started already with the European Union the discussions and negotiations on a new draft agreement of the same nature, but we believe that the existing bilateral intergovernmental agreements provide additional flexibility and allows for additional possibilities to develop the cooperation with the interesting states and the Russian Federation in the sphere of energy. We don't make a secret that Russian companies make good money on the European market, and we act just in the same mood that our competitors are doing. But we shall take into account the triple benefits of the European Union and this sphere. And I would say that Russia is committed to further develop the cooperation with the European Union. As you see, the total length of the gas infrastructure of the Russian Federation it's about 164,000 kilometers, which means that if there would be a possibility to put all of those pipelines in a line, the length of that line would be enough to make 4 tours of our planet, and even in such a case, a small quantity of pipelines will remain for us for pocket money. You can see, obviously, from this picture that the general direction of this infrastructure, of Russian infrastructure, is the European direction. And the final destination of the gas supply is Europe. It is important to understand that while discussing the issues related to the energy security, we have to recognize that a different group of countries have a different understanding of this problem. For consuming countries, energy security means unimpeded access to natural resources, while for producing countries, energy security is foremost sustainable demand. I'd like to point out to a specific issue and literally to the role of Caspian hydrocarbons for the energy supply of Europe. As you know, the production of oil in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan lately has increased significantly, while Kazakhstan has doubled its production of oil. Azerbaijan has tripled almost the production, its national production of oil. But in order to assess the total impact of that production for the global and European market, we need to make a wider comparison. And in case we compare those figures with the output of oil in Russia, we see that on the picture there is a big difference. So in order to be more objective, we could add to this list also Saudi Arabia. And we can see from this picture that Russia can easily afford competition with Saudi Arabia, while the other countries still need some additional efforts, probably. The same is relevant for gas production. You can see that the so-called gas superpower in Central Asia, Turkmenistan, which has by average an output of 60 billion cubic meters of gas, compares in proportion with the output of gas in Russia as 1 to 10. And there has been a lot of talk lately at different meetings about how to bypass Russia. Theoretically, that is possible, but it will cost you a lot of money. So what we need at this stage, at this phase, I would say, it's an interface in form of legal framework or in the form of a basic agreement between the European Union and the Russian Federation on terms related to the energy supply. So it's a very difficult task, and we acknowledge all the complexity of the problems related to the preparation of such an agreement. But on the other hand, I would like to remind you that some decades ago, the former Soviet Union and the United States managed to find a remarkable solution for another very difficult and complex problem. So we need such a solution with the European Union, which will take literally and metaphorically the energy supply and cooperation to new heights. We do favor a large cooperation with the European Union in energy supply, but it's important to mention that we always proceed from the position that such a cooperation shall be based on an equal basis. And the main principle of such a relationship proceeds from the understanding of sovereign equal rights of both parties. As a part of conclusion, I would say that cooperation with Russia will be crucial for the energy supply of the European Union. And as far as Russia is concerned, the European Union market will remain of strategic importance for Russia. And in my opinion, both the European Union and Russia are strongly motivated to find ways to move forward their energy cooperation. And a new institutional interface in the form of a basic agreement is required in this respect. And the principles of equal rights and mutual advantage shall be regarded as the basis for the institutional capacity building in this area. And the last but not least important, I would say, is that a fair share of risks and benefits between producers and consumers of energy resources remain crucial for the reliable energy supply. And this is the last diagram to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michel. Thank you very much for this presentation. And our last panelist tonight is Mr. Michael Rühle, Head of Energy Security, NATO. Mr. Wille, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here and to sit on a panel as prestigious as this one. When I heard the President mention Omišalj and on the island of Kirk earlier in his opening remarks, I couldn't help but feel nostalgic because about half a century ago, I spent a few days in Omišalj vacationing with my parents. And I remember that at the evening of a very long day, I said to my parents, if you will now buy me an ice cream, this will be the best day of my life. My parents had no choice. They had to buy the ice cream, obviously. You know, I was sort of blackmailing them. But I'm glad to be back in the country where I spent the best day of my life. Let me move from Croatia over the big pond to the US and start with a little story that concerns one of the richest men in the world, Warren Buffett, the famous investor. He had been reflecting, he reflects about many things, but one of the things he used to reflect about was what would catastrophes, major catastrophes mean for the insurance industry. And while he was still reflecting, 9/11 happened. And for the insurance industries, as for many other, for all of us, it was a major catastrophe. And he then realized that he was reflecting about something important, but he never turned his thoughts into action. And so in a letter to his shareholders a few weeks after 9/11, he sort of apologized. He said, I have violated the rule of Noah. Predicting rain doesn't count. You have to build arks. And I believe that his story, or his point is pretty straightforward. It's not enough to look at or observe important issues. You also have to somehow deal with them. And so the question for us at NATO is, of course, can NATO deal with the challenge of energy security? Now, the short answer is it simply has to. NATO's job is to safeguard the security of its allies, and this means that NATO must have a firm grasp of all the factors that shape our security environment. I think energy is clearly such a factor. It has the power to redraw the political and economic map of the world. We've already heard some of this by previous speakers. It can determine the rise and fall of nations, in fact. It can create new allegiances, but it also can create new security concerns. For example, concerns about terrorist threats to energy infrastructure, about tankers passing through narrow maritime choke points, or about cyber attacks paralyzing the data control systems that manage our energy distribution. Now, the Secretary General of NATO, in a speech recently, made it very clear. He said, energy security is not a call to arms. But when it comes to understanding the security implications of global resource developments, then NATO has to be ahead of the analytical curve and not behind it. NATO has a political consultation process. It has military planning mechanisms. It has intelligence sharing arrangements. But above all, it also has a partnership network with many countries across the globe, including with many energy producers and transit countries. But what does this all mean in concrete terms? What could NATO's role look like? Let me give you 5 very brief pointers. The first point is that allies need to have a much more systematic and much more regular discussion about the security implications of energy developments. We sometimes have these discussions, but we have them in expert circles. We don't have them on a major political level. And that, I think, is a shame. For example, what does the US shale gas revolution mean for transatlantic relations? The US becoming an exporter to Europe. Amazing. What does the Arab Spring mean for Europe's long-term energy supply? How will lower gas prices affect Russia's future economic outlook? These are issues that I think NATO needs to discuss and should not ignore it. My second point is that NATO must include energy security in its training and education programs, as well as in its exercises. Developments related to energy, resources, climate change, all these developments can severely alter our security landscape, be it in terms of politics or in terms of NATO's operational environment. And that's why I believe that our diplomats and military leaders need to learn about these aspects and also factor them into their policy and into their planning. My third point is that NATO needs to incorporate energy security in its cooperation with partner countries. As I said, we have several partner countries which are energy producers, transit countries. We have several who are very interested in working with NATO on energy security. And I believe that NATO needs to be more responsive to the interests of these partner countries. And we now, I believe, should start thinking about how to develop tailored cooperation programs with these interested partner countries, ranging from exchanging best practices on critical infrastructure protection to maritime security, you name it. My fourth point is that NATO needs to deepen its dialogue with other energy stakeholders. This is true, on the one hand, for other international organizations, such as the International Energy Agency, which was already referred to, but it's also true for relations with the private sector. Let's face it, the private sector owns and operates much of the infrastructure we're talking about. So I believe such a dialogue is long overdue. It would prevent a duplication of effort, nobody wants that, but it would also contribute to a consistent evaluation of risks and threats among the key energy players. And finally, I think NATO allies must also look at energy from a different perspective. We must enhance the energy efficiency of our armed forces. The logistical challenge of supplying modern forces with fuel during operations is enormous, and above all, it's enormously expensive. NATO is the perfect place to look together at energy efficiency in the military, ranging from the smarter use of generators in deployable camps to developing new interoperability standards on military equipment. Reducing the logistical effort means reducing fuel costs, reducing the risk for the soldiers who protect fuel convoys, and also it means demonstrating environmental awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, NATO is not an energy institution. That I should say from the outset. That privilege belongs to other players. But as this panel has already demonstrated, energy is shaping our environment, including our security environment. And that's why NATO must make energy security a mainstream subject on its agenda, very much like other non-traditional challenges, such as cyber, for example. We are only at the beginning, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. But if allies act in accordance with Noah's rule, we should be making progress. Predicting rain doesn't count. What counts is to build arcs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rode. Now, considering the time, I will have now to thank all the panelists. I must say it has been really, for me, it has been really exciting. I think we did sort of start on this road towards steering things in the right direction and not just letting things happen as far as energy policy and international relations are concerned. I have to apologize to the audience because my original intention was to leave at least half an hour for comments and questions from the audience. But if I was a better moderator, I probably wouldn't have been foreign minister. So I hope you will forgive me for this. I hope we have made it, and the panelists have made it up in the really interesting interventions that we heard from the podium. And, well, thanking everybody here on the stage, I would also like to invite all the other panelists from tomorrow, the first and the second panel, to join us here for a family photo before I let you go. Thank you very much.
皆さん